Welcome to the Love, Law, and Life Makeover podcast, a go-to for hope, faith, and joy in changing your life. I'm Neil Presley Cox, lawyer, speaker, and author of Hope Lines. I have an easy-to-find website, neilpresleycox.com. You can't miss it. And a nice welcome for my presenter and co-host, Kelsy Gibbs.
Okay, so for today's episode, we're going to be talking about following through the cracks, mental health and legal issues intertwined. Neil, do you want to just give us an overview of this chapter?
Falling through the cracks is it's about mentally ill people and what happens when they have to go through the court system, and in particular about the anguish that their loved ones, their care providers, go through. In this particular case, a young man's mother has been trying to get him help for some time, and then when he becomes an adult and encounters the criminal justice system, everybody references him needing mental health treatment, and effective mental health treatment doesn't seem to actually come his way, or when it does, it doesn't lead to the kind of change that would keep him out of jail, keep him in a place where he's reasonably healthy and even content. It's a very tragic situation, and one I encounter all too often as an attorney dealing with mentally ill persons.
Yeah, I know you, because we had talked before this and you had mentioned how this was kind of something that you deal with on a regular basis.
It's exploded in part because people are extremely stressed nowadays. We live in a society that seems to be producing more and more stress, anxiety, and I suspect, I believe, and there are now studies that social media and our smartphones are actually making us sick. And so that's definitely a factor. In addition to that, the potency of our controlled substances, including the pure THC marijuana that's out there and that young people are using at earlier ages, is also creating a mental health explosion in terms of numbers. So there's a lot more. Ask any jailer in America, they'll tell you there's a lot more mentally ill persons going in and out of the jails than there used to be. And certainly the number of mental health providers has not been able to keep up with that. And so what you have is a system that refers people and tells somebody you need to go get an evaluation, you need to go get some mental health help. And then once an individual tries to do that, they find that there's a long waiting list, and which creates tremendous delays. And if somebody's suffering from mental health problems, and then they're told that they can't even get a first appointment for 3 months, then that doesn't do their mental health any good. In fact, if they're hurting and they've already learned that substances can at least give them the illusion of relief, then when they hear that there's this huge wait to get any help and get things moving in terms of pleasing a judge in a criminal case, say, then they become severely depressed. And then the idea of using controlled substances just to deal with that stress once again rises up even higher and becomes a much more likely thing. So it's a terrible sort of a downward spiral where you don't have enough qualified mental health providers to deal with this flood of mentally ill persons. It's terribly sad.
Do you find, I guess, what would you say is there like a commonality between like crimes that mental illness people have? Like, is there like, I guess, is there like their go-to thing that they keep getting in trouble for that you've noticed personally?
That's a good question. And one thing I will say to that is the dual diagnosis situation. Mentally ill persons very often use controlled substances. And controlled substances can actually, in some instances, produce mental illness. But certainly in almost every case, the use of controlled substances, especially so-called hard drugs, can exacerbate an existing mental health problem. So I do see a lot of mentally ill persons getting into trouble by the use of possession of controlled substances. Of course, they often sell them and, whatever they have to do to support their habit.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Okay, that makes sense then.
I think my screen just kind of slipped up. So maybe we go off the record and let me fix that.
So I was also kind of curious in terms of, do you see a lot of parents? Because in the story, the mom is like definitely doing the best she possibly can for her son, who has mental illness, who's struggling with all of these issues. Um, are there quite a few parents that you're seeing that are, fighting for their kids, trying to do what's best for them and help them navigate through these situations?
I see that frequently where I find myself talking to a mother, a father, or a loved one of somebody that's in jail and they've got serious mental health problems. And if those mental health problems were given good attention and medication if needed and could be addressed well, the individual probably would not go back to jail. And when I talk to the family member, the loved one, I hear the story of how much they have gone through, how many efforts they've made, how many different providers they've talked to, even what they did when this person was a child, when this person was young, what they did to try to help. And just the pain is etched on their face. A lot of times it's years and years of trying to get somebody help. And they just don't know what the answers are. And sometimes there is no real good answer. There's only a long-term answer that has only a minimal chance of success. The difficulty, among others, with mentally ill persons is that in order for them to be stabilized, if they're having serious problems, if they're on medication, they have to take their medication consistently. And they have to not use illegal drugs in combination with their medication. And they have to show up for their provider meetings. And they have to do other self-care things that will help them. And they have to stay away from people that are unhealthy for them. So what you're doing is you're asking a person that has mental illness to do all these rational things over an extended period of time so that they will be okay. And in their mind, it just doesn't work like that. When they feel bad, they don't want to follow through on all these things that in their mind isn't going to make them feel better. So you're trying to put a rational framework on somebody who is viewing things in an incredibly irrational way, and it just doesn't work. You almost have to have somebody that is there 24/7 to keep all those things in place and check off every one of those boxes. And if somebody's an adult and isn't so incapacitated that they've been placed under a conservatorship or something of that nature, or if they're not in an institution, then even mom or the loved one doesn't have the power, the legal power even, to make the person do anything. So you see the rub there. You can make a good plan for somebody, but how's it going to be implemented? And that's true for any people, those of us who may not have mental health issues. I personally believe mental health illness is a spectrum and we all have it to some extent. But I
The
consider
human condition.
I consider myself, at this stage of my life, a fairly well-adjusted person. But for me to follow through on my own self-care plan is a tremendous struggle. There's all kinds of challenges with that, including talking myself out of it, feeling hopeless sometimes and giving up. And so it's that difficult for me. And so multiply that exponentially to a person with mental illness that is being asked to follow a rational care plan.
Hmm. What advice would you give to somebody in a similar situation?
Well, one of the things that I believe in is prayer. And because the problem I'm describing for some people, it doesn't really lend itself to an answer. And so that that form of hopelessness can actually not only, the mentally ill person is in serious jeopardy and long-term problems, but this person that is trying to help them is also in jeopardy because they may be wrecking their own health and putting aside all their own relationships, damaging their life to continue to try as hard as they can to get their loved ones some help. And so I think that the care providers ought to consider going to Al-Anon, and where they can meet with a community of people that are going through persons with drug addiction, alcoholism, and get some sort of some self-care and some shared spirit. I think prayer is good for situations that seem, at least to our human mind, hopeless. And other than that, just generally good self-care and a wise eye towards finding mental health providers who actually really care and do a good job. Because like any other segment of our society, finding a good mental health provider is hit and miss.
Hmm. I love it. Thank you for sharing this. This is so helpful. Are you, I guess aside from prayer, are there any books or groups you would specifically recommend?
In my in Hope Lines in this particular chapter, I actually referenced it's called the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they have a lot of resources, and can direct you to books and studies and things of that nature, and to other organizations. Similarly, there's the National Institute of Mental Health, and that has some resources. Um, there's a lot of information on the internet now, and I just would really encourage people, while they're looking for mental health professional solutions, to also be open to exploring spiritual solutions. I think from what I've seen, the best help is that dual spiritual mental health professional help. If you attack this problem from both angles, sometimes you get a almost miraculous willingness in someone to do things differently, because it's possible. I believe that people can change fundamentally, especially when they get that breath of fresh air from outside, that loving hand of whatever spirit they believe in. I personally believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that he offers us a spirit to help us when we're hurting. And so I think that combined with good mental health treatment, including medication where needed, can actually affect real change.
Mm. Thank you so much, Neil. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we end today's episode?
Just that my heart goes out to you, care providers. I've got a child that has his own struggles, and I know how much it hurts, and I wish you the best. I just do.
Thank you so much.